Hi, it's Andy with our Tuesday video this week. And on Sunday, I made a comment that Paul makes a statement in Romans 14:22 that some will find very confusing. Let me read what he wrote as a part of that verse. The faith that you have, keep between yourself and God. So does Paul mean that we are not to share our faith? No, that's not what he means at all. But before I get to that, please realize that this is a verse that many may use to try to quiet Christians, and some Christians will use to give them an excuse to be quiet themselves. For instance, we have heard of various individuals, we've heard of certain businesses who have been sued because of practicing their faith, and in doing so, it prevented them from serving someone in some way. And perhaps the most prominent of these is Jack Phillips at the bake shop in Colorado. But he's not alone, and the issue is nothing new. However, it is getting increased attention and will continue to be a pressing issue because really, most people really don't care if someone believes in God, if they have faith in Jesus or in anything else, as long as you just don't share it. If you want to do that at home, if you want to do that in a church, that's fine, but don't bring it into public. That's where people have a problem. So again, we look at Paul's words, and at first glance, well, we might say that they agree with that kind of idea, that we should keep our faith private. And some people would even use that again as an excuse not to share the gospel with others. But that's not what Paul means. And so, well, Andy, how do you know that? Well, first off, if Paul is writing that as the way a Christian should live, then Paul is the biggest hypocrite in the world, because all of these letters that he has written were about sharing his faith, were about helping others to know how to live out their faith properly. We see just from his life in the book of Acts, Paul publicly proclaiming his faith in the streets, while on his feet, presumably, in synagogues, in courts, in homes, in jails, everywhere. Paul is constantly proclaiming his faith. We also have verses like 2 Timothy 2:2, in which Paul says, take the things that you've heard from me, matters of faith, share them with other men, share your faith, who will then share it with others. Continuing that, 4 generations here, Paul, Timothy, men, others. And though we are here today, because those people have consistently shared their faith throughout the centuries. So, Paul was not suggesting that people don't share their love for Jesus. We can look at Peter, for instance. Peter says that we should always be ready to give a reason for the hope that we have. And both Paul and Peter call that greatest hope that we have the return of Jesus. So we can find other examples, but if we think of the Christian faith, we know we are to love, we know we are to serve, and, well, the Great Commission says that we're to share the gospel. We're to edify others. We're to build them up. And while it is a special obligation for church leaders to do that, we have passages like this week in verse 14:19, that says it is everyone's responsibility to build up other believers. So Paul absolutely cannot mean that we are to keep our faith private between us and God. So if that's not what he means, what does he mean? Well, basically, what he means is that we're not to flaunt our freedoms. We're not to go and share that, well, look at what I can do because I have faith. Now, I must restate, and I've said this countless times, but I don't want this to be overlooked in any of these videos, because some people will take Romans 14 too far this way. This is not a license to sin. Liberty, Christian liberty, is not a license to sin. It is a license to exercise our preferences a certain way, how we feel convicted to, but it is never a license to sin. Paul never excuses sin in any way, and certainly we don't want to take advantage of the shedding of blood that Jesus did for us by taking advantage of that. In verse 6, Romans 14:6, Paul states that what is being done, eating meat, not eating meat, Going to worship on a particular day of the week, going to worship every day of the week, or any other day of the week. Any of those things can be done for the Lord. That is, they can be done for His glory. But some people will live by a lesser set of restrictions than others. And as long as what they are doing is not sinful, then it's okay. But that does not mean that we should boast about it. We should never boast about the freedom that we have in our faith, at least and especially when it might be harmful to someone else. For instance, at some point in your life, you have likely been shocked to hear that someone liked a particular movie, or that they liked a particular TV show, or liked a particular song or style of music. You go, oh, I thought you were a Christian. Well, there are three types of music, for instance. When I was a youth minister, I shared this all the time, because I'd take youth different places, and they say, can we change the song, can we change the channel on your car stereo? And I said, yes. You've got 2 out of 3 kinds of music you can listen to. There's a type of music that honors God. There's a kind of music that is neutral. And there's a kind of music that dishonors God. As your youth leader, you can choose either of the first 2, but you can't choose the third. So, but some of the songs that I might listen to or might like, you might say, well, I can't believe the pastor would like that. If it's not dishonoring to God, then it really shouldn't matter. And that's Paul's overall thought here. But it is not for me to come around and say, hey, you should listen to this. You must listen to this, because that might be against your convictions. Either way, as Paul is saying here, this thought goes both ways. That both sides can be guilty of this. Paul's ultimate point is that we don't need to make a spectacle out of the freedoms that our faith, or the restrictions that our faith, might place upon our convictions. We don't need to share about it with other people. If the issue is not a matter of sin, then does it really matter? So why make a big deal about it with anyone if it doesn't really matter? So yes, we are to share our faith because faith matters. For eternity, faith matters. But on matters that really don't matter, well, those can and should often, if not mostly, be kept private.